What is up, fantasy people? Welcome into Extra Points featuring the True North Fantasy Podcast. I am Trav, living lavish in Dirty Laundry Studios. Co-hosting and West Coasting is my partner in crime, Tyrell McLaughlin. What's up, Ty?
Same old, same old.
Living the dream, right? Living the dream. Big day for us, buddy. I'm excited. Get it out. Of course, this is hour 2 of the Fantasy Points Media Group Marathon live stream. Want to give a big shout out to Nick from Play to Win Fantasy. He kicked off the show with some killer discussion on some strategies for the tight end position going into 2021. Make sure you check out P2W. Nick's doing some great work. We had him on the show a while back, and that was a lot of fun to record. And coming up right after us, right after we go off the air on this YouTube channel will be the team from the Dynasty Happy Hour. So they're going to have Wes Huber from Fantasy Points joining them to go through a rookie mock draft. Keep her dialed into the channel because this is where they're going to be, and this show is just getting started. And in case you didn't know, which you should, this stream is to commemorate the launch of the Fantasy Points Media Group, which was a smash hit. Actually, we're both really fired up to be a part of that. I want to give a big thanks to Ben Kukanis and the team at Fantasy Points for putting it all together. We did an impromptu launch live stream earlier in the week. Ben actually joined us on that live stream. We talked a little bit about the group, about what the Fantasy Points site has to offer, and it was fantastic. It's just really great, Ty, and I think you kind of encompassed it beautifully on that live stream, saying that it's great for us to be connected with a brand that we have so much faith and belief in, right? We've been following these guys' work. They do outstanding stuff. And yeah, like we couldn't be any happier to be a part of it.
No, we feel like, I imagine Chuba Hubbard or Chase Claypool moving, making the big move to American schools. But there's no doubt that we've attached ourselves to some pretty spectacular people. And I'm just really excited to be a part of it. And I do encourage everybody to go check out that little live stream we put together. It's just a quick video going through why we were so happy to join the group, for sure. And to have so many good groups join alongside of us as well, with Nick and Tyler and all them that we know pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find that video actually on our YouTube channel, the TNFF Network, and follow us on Twitter at True North FFB. And the pod has a pod specific account at TNFF Pod. So that's where you can find all of our stuff. But Ty, enough with the sweet nothings. The viewers are here for fantasy content, and that is what we intend to bring. You want to give them a tale of the tape for this episode, my man?
Yeah, so we have done some rookie talk in recent weeks. We did a pretty comprehensive coaching carousel epi. You can find that on our YouTube channel. And now with kind of the first big wave of free agency digested in our bellies, I figured we could roll through the teams, try and hit as many of the biggest offseason moves, what they mean for fantasy, and more or less address the identity of the teams going forward and identify these team needs on offense that still show up, like where we should be turning our attention to as we find ourselves less than a month away from the NFL draft.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm super stoked to run through it, Ty. I'm going to kick us off here. And since we are out west, we're going to start with the Western Division of the National Football Conference. And we're going to kick it off with the team whose offense that we have been pretty smitten with the last couple of years, I would say. And that would be the Arizona Cardinals. The biggest additions for them, of course, obviously, J.J. Watt was huge, and Malcolm Butler on the defensive side of things. The most notable as far as fantasy skill positions was A.J. Green, who they hope is a productive sidekick for DeAndre Hopkins. I think the biggest move was probably center Rodney Hudson coming in to shore up and quarterback that offensive line, and obviously to protect the real quarterback in Kyler Murray, who is an elite fantasy asset, I think we can all say. So, personally, Ty, I don't think this offense is a finished product yet. AJ Green showed last year he's kind of past his prime, and you know how I feel about Christian Kirk. The running back depth chart, I think, is the main one that we zero in on because only Chase Edmonds and Eno Benjamin are guys of note. So I think they could still tool up. But I want to know for you, Ty, because, this is an offense that runs a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, and they do have that need in the wide receiver or in the running back room. I want to know which one of those 2 positions do you think that they're most likely to attack in the first, say, 3 rounds of the draft?
Yeah, I think that is more of a question than the fantasy community kind of makes it out to be, because I don't think it will be both in the top 3 rounds. The problem is the Cardinals only have 5 picks in the NFL draft. They have no 3rd round pick. So you think about the prospect of a running back prospect, and then you also marry that with the hit rates. Like why we're looking at the top 3 rounds is because of how rare it is for a running back to finish top 12 in fantasy while being selected outside the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. And I think we're pretty much looking or hoping for fantasy. If you really want a running back to land in the desert, you're just looking at that pick at number 16 in round 1, pick number 49 in round 2. And I just don't see that happening because Arizona still has other needs. I mean, show me the mock draft in existence that doesn't have them going cornerback in round 1. But they also have to address right tackle, interior offensive line, still that front 7, even post JJ Watt signing. And I think they also need to add another wide receiver just to take advantage of this class. Their wide receiver room it's quietly pretty fragile long-term, including Christian Kirk is entering the final season of his rookie deal. And you made the point off the top with the Cardinals, like so long as Cliff Kingsbury is the head coach here, there's just a huge emphasis and responsibility placed on these wide receivers. About 70% of Kyler Murray's passes have gone to the wide receiver position in back-to-back years. And I said that they should take advantage of this wide receiver class. It's because of what I think the Cardinals are looking for at that position. Like it seems like Kingsbury wants that vertical slot element to his offense. That's more or less how we've seen Andy Isabella used. It's how KK used Kiki to put up, he put up over like 15 yards per reception in a blow up season back in Texas Tech too. And that's kind of where I would pause and, it's kind of a paralyzing question. Can Andy Isabella be that guy heading into his 3rd season in this offense? Because if not, they don't have much to show for that triple deep dip dive that they did at wide receiver with Isabella, Hakeem Butler, and Keyshawn Johnson. And, you look at this wide receiver room and there's just a ton of guys who profile exactly like that vertical slot wide receiver. And maybe Devontae Smith even, or a Jalen Waddle was to land at 6. Like if that would be a pretty miraculous slide in the draft, but maybe an Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore, maybe they can land a Tylan Wallace or Tutu Atwell later in the draft. I think a lot of this though does come down to what they do in the draft. Like they're going to need to move around a little bit to put themselves in a position to draft either a running back or wide receiver, because it does feel like a bit of a luxury pick for them because they have such little draft capital. And that kind of makes me want to circle back to running back really quick, Trav, just because this is a thin class. I think that's another reason that they probably, like, I'm not anticipating a rookie running back. If I own Chase Edmonds, I'd probably be more worried. Like I'd be less worried about a later round rookie than I would be for the Cardinals signing a running back like Wayne Gallman or James Conner, who are still on the scrap heap. But for right now, for fantasy, I'm probably chasing Edmonds. Like I've been taking him in the 7th, 8th rounds of my best balls. And I think it's a buzzy rookie running back landing spot in Arizona, not because the team's keying in on backs in this class, definitely not because they have the capital to oblige the fantasy community. It's just because Arizona is a sexy situation for a running back, and running back is so important for running, situation is so important for running backs. And the Cardinals have averaged over 23 points per game in PPR from the running back position. What I think though, Trav, is that almost exposes the replaceability in this offense for any running back. So adding a running back isn't going to be the ingredient that puts this offense over the top. And I think that's the other question I have for fantasy for the Cardinals is, do you think Kyler and the Cards could take another step on offense and become like a true powerhouse attack?
Yeah, I think they're just on the cusp of that already, right? I think we were kind of hoping they would take that leap in 2020, but they unfortunately didn't quite do that. And I think some of that can stem from Kyler Murray running the ball a little bit more than he did the previous year. Obviously, he had those 11 touchdowns, which was fantastic for him for fantasy. And we did see the passing volume go up a little bit, but I think also not nearly as much as we expected, Ty. They've been under 600 pass attempts both of the last 2 years. And we thought that they would be amongst the league leaders when we saw that Cliff Kingsbury was coming in there, drafted Kyler, got Nuke Hopkins. Like we thought that was a foregone conclusion almost, but it wasn't quite the case. So I don't know. I think the additions on the offensive line definitely are going to help that. Maybe Kyler can stay in the pocket a little bit more and sling it around, and they can, put up some more points. Obviously, that AJ Green signing isn't like huge for fantasy. I don't think he's going to be a massive productive asset for our fantasy rosters, but I think from a real football standpoint, he can be a good player for the Cardinals in that wide receiver room. So yeah, I think for me, I guess the key to them doing that is the passing volume going up again. So hopefully, a short up offensive line can help with that. But just like you, I'm not sure, a second round rookie at the 49th overall pick alone is going to move that needle, because the guy they're going to get at the 49th pick is not going to be somebody who's going to be a bell cow. Like in that range of the draft, I think we're looking at more receiving backs, and that's what Chase Edmonds is essentially. So, and he's really, really good at it too. So I think the offensive line is the main piece. And then if they can do that and add some electricity, or maybe somebody who can take on a good goal line role at the running back position, like those guys that you mentioned, because if we can't forget that Kenyon Drake had like top 10 running back volume last year. He just had really low efficiency, and it kind of circles back. The offensive line had the third fewest adjusted line yards last year for the Cardinals. So I think that's a big key. They're pretty close. They're not quite there yet, but this could be a year where they take that leap for sure.
Totally. And I think there is an avenue for that pass volume to go up. I think it's tied to the play volume that we all promised right away under Cliff Kingsbury, but it did come to fruition. They just exponentially improved their play volume. Obviously, that goes towards playing better defense, not getting dominated in time of possession. But we enjoyed such a buffet of positive regression that we actually, laid out on TNFF pretty good heading into the sophomore Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray season. But yeah, it's definitely a tough ask to ask for another step from this offense, just because they averaged 5.7 yards per play last year, which was up from 5.5 yards per play, which you don't usually see with that massive increase in volume. Maintaining that efficiency was really impressive in their sophomore season there. And definitely Kyler is the driver of the bus in Arizona. So I think if he can take that next step, then definitely this offense certainly could as well. And with that, Trav, let's move along to a team who is looking for their difference maker at quarterback, the San Francisco 49ers. They have some of our biggest loves in Brendan Ayuk, George Kittle. Debo gets a lot of love. We love any Shanahan running back not named Tevin Coleman. This offseason was kind of putting along quietly for the 49ers. They just lost some talent, including on their coaching staff. And through the first wave of free agency, they pretty much just retained their own talent. Then kablamo, Lynch and Shanahan traded for the third overall pick in the NFL draft, Trav. One of the biggest trades in 49ers history. And I think John Lynch and Shanahan sort of tied their future to this pick, because they won't have those first round picks going forward. And Trav, because of the capital they gave up, it's no secret they're going to draft a quarterback, but Jimmy Garoppolo is still there. They didn't trade him when they arguably had the chance to do so. So tell me who you think the 49ers starting quarterback is week 1, but also week 10. Like, what rookie quarterback do you think San Francisco made this move to go up and get? And do you think that guy's going to beat out Jimmy G sooner rather than later?
Yeah, so I'm gonna focus on the rookie quarterback that they're gonna go out and get, because Ty, you and I have talked about this a lot off air since they went splabow and made that trade. That was a reference to Pootie Tang, by the way. Ty, movie references are usually, for anyone listening, not necessarily my bag. Movie references, Ty makes a lot and they go over my head, so
they have to be on VHS if Trav's making them.
Yeah, or Disney on VHS, or Disney. Yes. Yeah, give me the Disney movies all day. But we've talked about this a lot off the air with San Francisco making that trade, Ty. And I don't think you're mortgaging your future for Mac Jones. That's just like my belief. And I think Shanahan is smart enough to know that. They've already said that they hope that Justin Fields does another throwing session, which they can attend. So I think that is potentially a good sign, but there is a lot of smoke about that Mac Jones at 3 pick. But man, Justin Fields is just one of those guys, like we were talking about with Kyler and the Cardinals. He can take your offense to a next level. He can like just unfurl some things that Mac Jones can't do. And so I think it's got to be Justin Fields. And as like either guy, like I think Justin Fields 100% beats out Jimmy Garoppolo. He just brings that mobility. He brings more downfield passing. He was the 3rd highest deep completion percentage of this class last year. So he can definitely get it downfield. You saw it at the pro day. I'm not sure. I think of the two, Mac Jones has less of a chance to beat Jimmy Garoppolo out in camp or whatever, because he does a lot of the same stuff that Jimmy Garoppolo does. Jimmy Garoppolo's just got some more experience behind it and whatnot. Mac Jones can do some deep passing as well. He was 4th behind Justin Fields in that deep completion percentage, but I just want to see Justin Fields there so bad, man.
No, me too. And, in this exercise, I think we're assuming that Zach Wilson goes number 2 to the Jets. which leaves, you know, Fields, Lance, and Mac Jones. It's hard to imagine Trey Lance also could inspire as much confidence as San Francisco is exuding with this move, just because he is a small school guy. He does have that small sample size, and neither John Lynch nor Shanahan attended his pro day either, meaning they've never met Trey Lance nor seen him throw in person, never met him in the flesh. Whereas this staff does know Justin Fields. Like, he attended the quarterback collective camp with a couple 49ers coaches, couple influential Mikes. Kyle and Daddy Shanahan were there, Mike McDaniels as well. The other reason I think the pick is Justin Fields is, like you said, the same reason it's not Mac Jones. The whole reason they're doing this, I think, is to get a quarterback that has that ceiling, who can be a top 5 to 10 quarterback. And they said as much in their presser the other day as well. To me, that says a quarterback who doesn't have limitations, by the way, throwing the ball downfield or outside the hashes. And I think they want a dual threat, somebody who can create, extend plays, and excel when the structure breaks down. And these are all boxes that, in my opinion, Justin Fields checks. And they're all boxes that I think Mac Jones does not check. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that they were in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and then the quarterback play, you know, all that's missing since then is that their quarterback play has fallen off a cliff. Yeah, they dealt with some injuries, but they just had no vertical element to their passing game last year, even off of play action. And there's a lot of weeds we could go into, but Jimmy G is deep passing, the overall roller coaster of his career. But that's just one more reason I think the 49ers are making this move, right? Is because they can't trust Jimmy G to do anything, whether it's stay healthy or create explosive plays. And I think, like, let's pretend it's Fields, Trav, just to give some fantasy spin here. I think it would be one clear winner in this offense. I think it's Brendan Ayuk. Come on down. Like, the splits with and without Kittle are a little bit frightening, but so is the idea of not owning Brendan Ayuk in a Shanahan offense that's about to expand. We always want sophomore wide receivers who produced as rookies, who were first round picks in the NFL draft anyways. And Brendan Ayuk checked those boxes, and, you know, he had zero ceiling attached to him in 2020. And he'll just be the biggest benefactor of this offense throwing the ball down the field. And I think it also makes George Kittle a little bit more palatable in that second round of a fantasy draft, definitely at that 2-3 turn. And, you know, I'm with you. I expect Justin Fields to start early. It's definitely a relatively new phenomenon, but top 10 picks in the last decade, it's almost a foregone conclusion that they're starting 12 plus games in their rookie season. And in San Francisco, you have this elite offensive line that I think, you know, we can point to contributing to a lot of the success in Shanahan's system. And I think that really lifts up the running back position in this offense too, just because if it were Justin Fields or even Trey Lance, you know, this is already a running back situation to buy multiple pieces from for multiple reasons. But then you take this system, inject a mobile quarterback, and that's going to build in even more efficiency for the running back. So Raheem Mostert, just like Chase Edmonds, I think they're both interesting backs that I'm kind of identifying as targets in that range of the draft that I'm usually actually avoiding running backs too. So even Jeff Wilson, I think, is a screaming value once you get in that 9th, 10th round range.
Yeah, we love us some Jeffy Wilson here at True North Fantasy Football. Going to be a great target, and I bet you the zero RB truthers are also going to love them some Jeff Wilson this year. So keep an eye out for him in drafts. But Ty, let's keep it moving. I want us to hop in the 6-0 and head down to Inglewood, California. We're going to talk a little bit of Los Angeles Rams. I've got a little bit of a rapid fire segment here on the Rams for you, Ty. We've already talked a little bit about the Matt Stafford for Jared Goff deal. Love that move for them to move into true contender status in Los Angeles with that stellar defense that they have. They picked up my boy D-Jax, and they also lost Gerald Everett and Malcolm Brown for the running back room. So things are kind of looking like we could see the Sean McVay offense of yesteryear with those 11 personnel sets almost exclusively. And when they weren't afraid to rely on throwing the ball to win games, where we've seen them kind of get away from that the last year or so. So I want you to tell me, first off, do you think that's a safe assumption that this offense is going to do a 180 with Matt Stafford in the fold?
Yeah, so I will kind of pour a little bit of cold water on here, but I'll preface this whole thing by saying this isn't a condemnation on the wide receivers in particular for fantasy. If you look at since 2017, in terms of combined PPR points, the wide receiver position, the Rams have finished fourth, and 12th in total PPR points. So I don't want that to get lost, but and, you know, now you swap out Jared Goff for Matt Stafford, like it undoubtedly opens up more possibilities, more opportunities for chunk plays in particular. So on the surface, you definitely like it for somebody like Robert Woods. But I do have a bit of a hang up here because looking at Woods, looking at Kupp, Are we super confident in saying the Rams have the weapons to start chucking it downfield? Does that style of play suit their team? You know what I mean? Once you add in the fact that the Rams probably have the best defense in all of football. So I really think what this does is make shots off play action and stuff like in this offense, the deep shots will be far more effective. The production will go up. Some ceiling gets added to guys like Robert Woods for fantasy, but I just don't know that the Rams change their identity on offense very much, if at all. And I'll tell you though, I would have been more worried had the Rams done more at tight end, which I know sounds kind of silly. It's just that last year we were getting bombarded with 12 personnel talk, 2 tight end sets for the Rams. But now, they lose Gerald Everett. I think they lose Johnny Munt as well to free agency. So, I'm probably on board with the concept that they are going to run a lot more 3 wide receiver sets, but I don't know if that's going to come at the expense of the running game and things like that. But definitely the average depth of target is going to go up a little bit. There's going to be more air yards, especially converted air yards. But I don't think the offense is going to be so different that Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are guys who are relying on air yards as opposed to yards after the catch. Like yards after the catch will still be the essence of this offense, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you there on all fronts. So next rapid fire question, is Deshaun Jackson a viable option as their main deep threat, or do you think they're still going to add?
I think they need to add a field stretcher still. I think Djax is almost the teams can't lie to us example, if anything. Like clearly the Rams want Stafford to have a lid lifter at his disposal. McVay wants that for the scheme, but you definitely can't rely on Djax filling that role all season. And, that's really all they could afford in free agency. That's what happened there. So definitely expecting a wide receiver in the draft for the Rams and one of a specific profile. The problem is the Rams, they're hyper allergic to first round picks. They don't pick until 57, not again until just before pick 1. I think they only have a couple top 100 picks this year. I think they might've got a comp pick as well. So 3, top 110 picks or whatever, but not a ton of capital, and they have needs to address. And a lot of these wide receivers we're going to talk about, they're explosive slot guys. So there's not a lot of guys that really suit this offense. I think somebody you could put your finger on, maybe a Diami Brown I'm looking at here. That one would make a lot of sense. And I think the point here is that Van Jefferson owners in Dynasty will definitely be clenching their butt cheeks a little bit for 3 wide receiver sets come draft day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it would be so Rams of them to take their only pick in the top 2 and use it on what could kind of be considered a luxury position. So looking at those wide receivers, you got reliable Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. Do you think that they are still undervalued, Ty? You talked a little bit about them, but just as far as value, I know you're deep into the best ball drafts already. Can we get these guys at a value right now?
Yeah, big time. I think they are both values, as always, annual values, both these guys. I think Kupp is definitely less of a winner than Robert Woods. Like I've kind of inverted these 2 players' ceilings almost in the last couple of years. And just because he loses that spectacular chemistry he had with his blonde BFF and the rapport that extended to the red zone, right? So I worry about the ceiling, the touchdown upside a little bit. What I don't want to lose sight of though, is that there are very few teams that can support multiple top 24 wide receivers for fantasy. The Rams have always been one of those teams. Adding Stafford should just enforce that, I think.
And the last of the rapid fire questions, is Cam Akers a top 12 running back this season? I know your boy Hendo's behind him.
I would say maybe. So diplomatic. Look, he's in good shape to score a lot of touchdowns, should see a ton of carries, but definitely questions to ask about the upside in the passing game. We want to know if Matthew Stafford will come in and curve this running back market share a little bit that we've seen in LA, just take a real big haircut over the last couple seasons. Akers will get drafted very high in fantasy drafts. That's the only problem I have. Even seen him go right at the turn in the first round there sometimes in best ball drafts. And I just have a few more questions with Cam Akers, and I just don't salivate over the talent of Cam Akers like I do just in comparison to some of the running backs that are going right around him in round 2 of fantasy drafts.
Yeah, for sure. Cam Akers was one of those guys who could have been considered one of those luxury picks last year, obviously with the second rounder. I still have a little bit of belief in Darrell Henderson though. And I think people are really, really sleeping on him. I'm taking him late in drafts because, he's, we don't wish injury on anybody, but he's 1 injury away from being like a monster running back. So don't sweep Darrell Henderson fully under the rug if you're in fantasy drafts this offseason. I'm going to keep Moses.
That's
Yeah,
a
he's
zero
a
RB target.
great zero RB target. Absolutely. So I'm going to keep Mosey and Ty. We are going to go to the closest geographical team to us on the west coast of Canada, and that would be the Seattle Seahawks. No, neither of us are Seahawks fans, and we get it jammed down our throat far too much out here. But I digress. The Coles notes for the additions for the Seahawks. They re-signed Chris Carson and they brought Gerald Everett in to be their tight end, which is a fantastic move. So I'm going to kind of gloss a little bit over Chris Carson here, Ty, because I think there's a bigger ticket item for the Seahawks to talk about. But Chris Carson, as of right now, does slot back into that. He has top 12 upside, but I don't think he's quite going to finish there kind of range. That's kind of where I would put him. He did have almost 50 targets a couple years ago. So that I think would be the avenue for him hitting that top 12. But I think it's a bit of a long shot. I think, top 15, top 20 is probably more reasonable. But I want to head back to the kitchen and talk about Chef Russell Wilson, see what's on the menu here, Ty. I want you to tell me what you think this offense is going to look like. And what is Russell Wilson's fantasy value this coming season?
Yeah, I mean, Russ huffed and puffed and they didn't trade him, so they better turn the offense over to him, right? But Seahawks players, their ADP right now does not reflect that. The fantasy community is buying that narrative. Understandably, Trav, we were looking down the barrel of the 12th straight season the Seahawks could throw under 575 passes, longest streak by far, and the exact duration of Pete Carroll. His tenure, obviously. The other note, I think, for this offense and what we want to see unfold is the guy from the Rams who was taking over as the play caller for Seattle. I am kind of excited to see Russ in what could be a more creative offense, like play action rollouts and things like that, which could make Russ even more dangerous, maybe hopefully keep the sacks down. The question that just keeps coming to the surface is who wins in that whole, because Russ didn't pick Shane Waldron, right? So in this stupid battle between an elite quarterback and a borderline antiquated offensive system, who's going to win that out? I really don't know. And I won't go down that wormhole because we just did a couple of weeks ago, Trav, but there's still a lot of value to mine for fantasy here because the efficiency isn't going anywhere. And the fear that it might seems to get baked into the price of all these Seahawks annually. The only issue I have is that, Pete Carroll does slap on the reins and the offense has gone just ice cold in the second half of the season in back-to-back years. And that is straight up been a fantasy death nail, especially if you own Russell Wilson, literally MVP Russ through half the season, back-to-back years now, but quarterback at 11, quarterback 14 from weeks 9 on in back-to-back years. So yeah, not hard to call him a better quarterback in best ball. He still has a very exquisite win rate every year in that format. But the whole point with this offense in Seattle is that if we ever do get that uptick in value, then Russ has a ceiling that is about as high as any quarterback in NFL history. His touchdown rate is already historic, including the number of seasons. He's posted a 6% touchdown rate or higher, and it's because he's elite in the two highest leverage departments. He's one of the most effective deep ball passers, and Russ is one of, if not the best quarterback inside the red zone. And it's pretty infuriating to just pause and think that he could be coached by Pete Carroll for his entire career. And it just always, it makes him a tough quarterback to pin down in terms of fantasy value, right? Anywhere else, he's easily a top 5 quarterback in all formats. But for me, I'll probably rank him just outside of that for 2021. Again, just because you have Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar, Dak, these are pretty locked in guys. But after those guys, I definitely start like Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert. These are the quarterbacks that stick out to me as having that exquisite 400-point upside. Where do you fall in that argument, Trav? Do you worry about the splits, the volume, or do you see the upside there? And is his cost worth it?
Yeah, well, I think definitely we would love to see the volume come up. And I love the efficiency, but I don't think if the volume did come up that efficiency would quite maintain. I think he would be very efficient still, but I think it just kind of, I think you always say if you're following the math, it would probably come down a little bit, right, Ty? But I think, he's right in that tier that you were mentioning with Justin Herbert. And I think that's why it's really important to go into a draft with at least having mental tiers of players, because then you're not going to be reaching necessarily, and you're going to know what guys you value similarly. So I think if you get to the back of that tier and Russ is still there, I think that is probably a solid price for him.
No, that's a good point. He might be a guy you can identify at the end of a very intriguing tier at quarterback this year. So I want to roll out of the Hawks on a quick true or false here, Trav. We should take DK Metcalf in the second round of all formats. True or false?
I think that's false. I think, well, especially if we're talking super flex, you're seeing quarterbacks. Not quite. No. I think from what I've seen, wide receivers are falling a little bit, especially we play a lot of super flex, right? And so you see, 6 or 7 quarterbacks at least go in the first round. So I think that might be a little bit high for me on DK, because I think we're going to see some regression. And I think he could be a very high variance player, just the way that he gets his bread,
Speaking of high variance wide receivers on the Seattle Seahawks, Tyler Lockett will finish second in targets on the Seattle Seahawks. Kind of in subtext, will the Seahawks add a wide receiver in the top few rounds?
Right. I got you. Yeah. I think he's actually going to finish first. So that would be false. We know that he's Russell Wilson's boo. Like I said, with DK, I could see his targets coming down to the point where he's still putting up like 1,100 yards, but on like 75, 80 targets. And I think Tyler Lockett, especially after that 4-year, nice $69 million deal that he got, I think he's kind of locked back into that for me. I think they could add, but I think they've shown recently that they don't mind having, for lack of a better term, some guy that we don't necessarily know a lot about as their wide receiver 3, because the offense is a bit of a funnel to those two guys, DK and Lockett. So I think Tyler Lockett will finish first. And if they do add, I don't think it'll be of huge significance that necessarily moves the needle on Tyler Lockett's value for me.
So another team with a dynamic duo at wide receiver is where the Super Bowl was and where it resides, the Tampa Bay's Buccaneers. Who spent their off-season selling, I guess, but also trying to get the band back together, which with all the personalities involved kind of makes me imagine like a Mighty Ducks scenario, like, Arians obviously is Coach Bombay and Tom Brady is Captain Conway. And I just imagine they go one by one, like Chris, woo, and then they all start coming. Chris Godwin grabbing Gronk, Shaq Barrett and Levante David can't resist. And then
probably on a yacht somewhere.
Yeah. Leonard Fournette's clearly Goldberg in this analogy, yeah. Which would make Ronald Jones Julie the Cat. Anyways, yeah, everybody needs a montage. So I kind of bring all that up, Trav, because they are the champs, just like a certain minor hockey league team who overcame adversity. And Mahomes and co were definitely the Iceland of the NFL last year. But I'm done. Sorry. Tampa Bay, do you think they're the best team in football heading into 2021? They have pretty much the same group here. And does that make them one of the best teams to tie to for fantasy?
Yeah, I think one of the best teams. And they have a great passing game to tie to for fantasy. We know that. The run game, I'm not so sure. We know, the Kangal Killa, Bruce Arians, is going to put the ball up in the air 600 plus times. Brady threw over 625 times last season, and he finished second behind Aaron Rodgers with 42 touchdowns. So the passing volume is going to be fantastic. I think Mike Evans is yet again going to be a great value. Chris Godwin, I think he's primed for a bounce back in my book as well. Obviously, he's got a lot of versatility behind him. And then you got Gronk and a healthy OJ Howard. So I think the passing game is great. There is some talk that they might bring back Antonio Brown. I wouldn't necessarily love that, but I think these guys can all produce and will probably give you spike weeks. So look out for that in your best ball leagues to maybe stack some of those guys. But the running backs is just such a hard time for me to decipher, because it looks like Leonard Fournette's going to be the receiving back. He was that last year, but that role only yielded 47 total targets. So it's just really,
I think they can add a running back.
Yeah, and then don't forget about poor Keyshawn sitting back there just collecting dust. So the running back room is a little bit messy. So to say that they're the best team to tie to, I don't think so. They're one of the best passing games for sure. And I think in the running back room, I would probably actually lean Rojo, just because I'm pretty confident he's going to be near those 200 carries, whereas I'm not so confident about Leonard Fournette's targets, because he had 47 last year. Ronald Jones had 42 on the year, so he wasn't that far behind.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. But Ty, we're gonna roll out of the Bucks in a second. But I got one more question. We talked about the wide receivers. We're gonna harken back to the age-old question, which is actually just a question from last year specifically: Chris Godwin's or Mike Evans, and does that change for you in Dynasty versus just for 2021?
Yeah, I think both guys are tough buys for 2021. I'm not sure I want either, to be honest, in the top 3 rounds of a redraft league. But if we do slap the dynasty lens on, I think both guys are interesting at their ADPs. What changes the most is how much higher I am on Godwin in dynasty for sure. I do have him as a top 12 wide receiver. He's on the tag this season, but Tampa Bay could have a hard time getting a long-term deal done with him. Not to mention Godwin might want to sign an extension with a team that does not have a Mike Evans there. And I think Godwin can be the man, like a true wide receiver one somewhere. So that's to explain why I'm so much higher on Godwin, but I'm also a bit higher on Mike Evans just because he feels a little bit discounted in startup leagues, in startup drafts, because he maybe feels like old news, so to speak. But I think he has multiple seasons left. It's not like he's winning with freak athleticism or anything. The touchdown upside should always be there. And if Godwin leaves in 2022, we remember kind of the monopoly Big Mike had in this offense once upon a time. But again, in redraft, I'm singing a bit of a different tune for this team overall. We could say Tampa Bay is the best team in football for sure. Maybe that's true, but yeah, for fantasy, I don't have any Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the top 3 rounds and just Godwin and Evans in like probably the top 75 picks of a draft right now in my rankings.
Yeah, that's right about where I'm at too.
So another dynamic duo at wide receiver, we're just going to keep this one going along, is the Atlanta Falcons. And the Falcon fans will be just forced to watch a really bad defense this year. Sorry, Deep Browner. And we've talked about how their only path to being a competitive team, it might be via being a powerhouse offense, right? Unfortunately, they couldn't really add in free agency as anticipated. They didn't do much because of their cap. What they did this offseason was it was funny, but what they actually did was clean house. They have a new GM, new head coach in Atlanta, and on our coaching carousel episode, I kind of gushed about the Arthur Smith hire, so I won't again. But essentially, Atlanta feels like they're trying to replicate the success they had in 2016. This system is a fairly similar one to Kyle Shanahan's, and so the moves that they made that kind of tickled me, Trav, is they brought in Lee Smith, a blocking tight end, and they brought in my boy Mike Davis. Now, I'm not suggesting the Falcons are going run heavy or anything under Arthur Smith. It's going to be next to impossible to change the identity of an offense with Calvin Ridley, Julio, and Matt Ryan and a sieve for a defense. But I do love Mike Davis, and I think he is shaping up to be the lead back in Atlanta. And I think I'm more interested in that lead back in Atlanta going forward for fantasy.
Yeah.
Do you think they upgraded, or do you think they're still like looking to add a rookie running back? Or do you think this all comes down to what they do with the 4th overall pick? Because that pick seems to have increased in value post 49ers Dolphins trade.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Mike Davis is an upgrade over last year's Todd Gurley. It's wild to be saying that, but I think Mike Davis showed it last year that if he can be in a good situation, which Arthur Smith's offense is one that we chase for fantasy football, especially for running backs. So I think, Mike Davis is definitely an upgrade over Todd Gurley, but I do think that they're going to take a running back in the draft. And I don't think it necessarily depends on that 4th pick because they're not going to go running back at 4 overall. I think the splash pick for them at 4 would be them going with a quarterback, which I also think to them is a concession that they know that their only avenue to get a win is to sustain a high-powered offense. So even if they don't go quarterback at 4, Matt Ryan could use the benefit of a good running game, and I think that's what Arthur Smith wants to do. So to me, that 2nd-round pick almost feels like a foregone conclusion. At the 3rd pick in the 2nd round, I believe, is 3rd or 4th, I believe.
I think it would be 4th since they picked 4th overall.
Well, I was looking actually, and it said that they were the 3rd pick, and it kind of blew my mind. So maybe just where I was looking, I was mistaken or whatever. But yeah, I think they're going to take a running back with that pick. That is wheelhouse for a running back run to start. And I think they're going to be involved in that because, this defense is not going to turn around overnight. And I think you encapsulated it really well, actually, on that coaching carousel, where their only path with, especially their cap situation, is to just double down on offense and try and outscore folks. So I think they're going to add at running back. Not necessarily sure yet what that does to Mike Davis. It depends on the guy that they add, I guess. But I'm definitely in on the Falcons running back room for sure.
Yeah. And I think it does come down to what they do at 4. Like if they stay at 4, I think they probably just take Sewell or a quarterback. I think a trade back scenario with like Carolina or Denver, maybe that's how they land a Kyle Pitts or something, which is a really buzzy landing spot for him right now. As for the running back situation, I definitely think they're in the mix for somebody like Javonte Williams at that pick that you referenced, but I also have a hard time buying a new GM coming in and spending a high pick right away on a running back. You just don't see that very often, but I definitely want the lead running back come September in this Atlanta offense, where I've kind of faded that running back, the lead running back, as of late. And so that's why I'm kind of buying up Mike Davis just while I can, because he's definitely not seeing that meteoric ascent in value. That's for sure.
And
Why don't we
because you
go?
love him.
I do. I can't not
You
admit
can't quit
that.
Mike Davis. I love it.
I can quit him. I just don't want to.
Okay.
So let's go to his ex team, a squad who might be one of the teams trying to buy up that 4th overall pick off the Falcons too. Too bad they're in the same division. The Panthers currently sit at 8th in the draft, just ahead of the Broncos, which is good. I guess that's better than being behind them. And Carolina is a team we really need to see how this quarterback position shakes out, I think, because we have seen them be pretty hyperactive in the market. And I think it's a pretty excellent environment for a quarterback. So what do you think Carolina does to address that position? Do you think it's going to be an upgrade on the beloved Teddy Bridge quarterback?
Yeah, I think they are in a good spot to have both Trey Lance on the board as well as the guy the Niners don't take. So whether that's maybe Mac Jones, Justin Fields, or Zach Wilson potentially, I know it'd be kind of wild to see those guys get back to the 8th pick, but I think they're going to pull that trigger if one of those guys is there. I think all 3 of them would probably be an upgrade over Teddy B at this stage in his career. Trey Lance may need a bit more seasoning if he were to land there. I think Teddy might still start for a bit if Trey Lance landed there. And I'm not so sure if Mac Jones beats out Teddy, but Justin Fields, like, absolutely. And I think they'd be jumping for joy if they got him at the 8th pick, and he would be starting day one, because he offers that pocket mobility that I think Matt Rule and Joe Brady really, really want. And I know you well enough to know that we would both go bananas if Justin Fields landed in that Matt Rule offense.
No, absolutely. I worry they're in a bit of a tough spot, because I think Atlanta would take a very similar package from Denver, or even a team like the Patriots or another AFC team, rather than risk their division rivals landing a franchise quarterback. But yeah, you're right. I think they're very much in this market. And, I think it's interesting. Like a month ago, it felt hot when we were suggesting that Mac Jones could go in the top 10 to Carolina. And now it seems exceedingly less likely that he makes it to them. And if you're asking me to, I think it depends on how the board falls. Like I'm kind of anticipating Teddy as the starting quarterback in Carolina, just because I don't think the board's going to fall the way they like it. Because if you're asking me to consider other quarterbacks in the top 10, that's a tough task. So yeah, I think they're
that's a tough mond.
Yeah. So I think that they are a little bit in quarterback purgatory for sure.
For sure. So just before we spin out of the Panthers here, Ty, we're going to have to start ripping here, but CMC's coming back. Dan Arnold is coming in. Do you think their pass catching crew is pretty set with Curtis Samuel out the door, or do you think they could be adding somebody to soak up some of the work that he's leaving behind?
Yeah, I mean, David Moore came in as well. Maybe he takes a little bit of the deep passing work. I think we want to see how DJ Moore is going to be used. Obviously, we saw his usage a little bit different last year. So I'd love to see him just inherit a lot of the work that Curtis Samuel leaves behind. We know he can. So that's my hope, but I hope that doesn't come at the expense of some of the air yards and stuff for DJ Moore, because right now I'm really interested in some of these guys like hashtag CMC, no matter what. He's my first overall player, always has, always will be. DJ Moore in the 4th, though. Are you kidding me? Like, I am in love with that. And same with Robbie Anderson. Like, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to take him, but I'm taking him in like the 6th or 7th round. Call me crazy. So I like a lot of these pieces for sure. I think there is some uncertainty in the fantasy community surrounding the quarterback position, but I think they're being priced at their floor basically for fantasy. Mm-hmm. And speaking of uncertain value, let's just go to the Jameis Winston-led New Orleans Saints, Trav. We hope it. Yeah, I mean,
rather assumptive of you.
Yeah, it could be the Taysom Hill-led Saints. Who knows? If you look at the extreme for what this offense could look like under Taysom Hill compared to Jameis Winston, like the Saints could end up on one end of the spectrum or on the entirely opposite end of the spectrum. Then you start to consider if and how those two quarterback styles that completely contrast could merge. Like, are we going to see some wild quarterback by committee approach? And really, I need an aspirin if we're going to talk about the Saints quarterback situation, especially when the whole point of this exercise is to assign fantasy value to them and the weapons. And the headache isn't going anywhere because the Saints head coach, Sean Payton, is famously opaque, borderline arrogant. So it's possibly just disguises this for as long as humanly possible. One thing we can all agree on is that this is probably the weirdest quarterback competition of all time. If that is your real name, like, let's go there, Trav. Do you buy that? Like, that's how Sean Payton is trying to sell this as a true quarterback competition. So are you buying that? And does that mean we'll get one full-time starter, or should we prepare for some kind of Tamis Hilston monster?
Tamis Hilston. If you could merge those two, that'd be fantastic. But to be honest with you, I have no clue what's going to happen here. I think some of the signs from last year point to maybe Taysom Hill getting the nod because we didn't see much of Jameis, but man, do I want it to be Jameis Winston quarterback in this squad. I just think like the tricky piece for that is that I think even from when Drew Brees was in there, if Jameis Winston comes, I think this offense would probably still have to change quite a bit, namely in the average depth of target and air yards variety. So I want to see that because I think, it'd be great for Michael Thomas. It'd probably be good for Alvin Kamara and whoever, maybe Traquan. Maybe we get the Traquan bounce back tie. I think that would be amazing.
Marquez Callaway will throw his name out for Jimbo.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, but then when you look at Taysom Hill, say what you want about him, but the guy had 3 quarterback 1 weeks last year as a guy who had never started an NFL game as a quarterback. And he also had 2 games over 35 pass attempts, and he had over 70% completions in both of those games. So there is something there. I just think we haven't seen it enough to love him the way Sean Payton does. But he does give you that piece where he'll run the ball and he'll run for touchdowns. 64% of his fantasy points came as a runner last year. So I think there's some upside to be had. I think if Taysom's in there, we kind of downgrade the passing weapons and we upgrade Taysom. And then if Jameis Winston is in there, we upgrade the passing weapons and just hope that Sean Payton adapts that offense to fit Jameis and the YOLO balls.
For sure. And I'm going to put a separate video out really soon about just Jameis, what it could possibly mean, comparing some of the air yards that we've seen Jameis put up in his career compared to early 2000s with Drew Brees and Sean Payton, imagining that ceiling, and then looking back at how efficient the air yards have actually quietly been in New Orleans over these past half decades. I want to try and come down on one side or the other, because I know even if we assume Jameis Winston is the starter, there's even a wide range of outcomes for this offense, how they want Jameis to play, if he suits that style of play going forward, and just the success New Orleans has had playing the opposite way. Like, I think people would be shocked to hear that the Saints offense scored more points than the Chiefs last year. Only a few teams scored more offensive touchdowns than the Saints last year. So they've had success playing this very low average depth of target passing game in that fashion. So I don't know if we can just, oversell Jameis Winston when it comes to the air yards, but I might try in a video coming up.
Please do. Okay, Ty, why don't I move us into the Cowboys here? I understand we're running pretty long. We got about 5 minutes left, so I don't think we're going to be able to rip through all of these teams, but like Ty said, we're trying to put out some short informational videos, so maybe we'll get back in the lab and finish off some of these teams ourselves, and you can find that on the TNFF network. So keep an eye on our podcast channel at TNF, or our podcast Twitter at TNFF pod. Okay, Ty, I think we probably got enough time for one more team. So let's talk about the Cowboys. What's up?
Oh, I was just going to say, let's go rapid fire on this division then.
Absolutely. So the Cowboys, is this a top 3 offense to tie to?
Yes, it is. Passing yards, passing yards, passing yards.
Absolutely. I agree. Do you think Zeke is still a top 5 running back with this pass heavy offense?
Not top 5, top 12 in redraft, yes, and avoid in startup.
Okay. And what about the soft?
I was going to ask you that one. I want to know about, because I don't know. So CeeDee Lamb in the slot. CeeDee Lamb is kind of constricted to the slot. Do you think that caps his ceiling, or are we expecting that big sophomore step coming?
I don't think it necessarily caps the ceiling, because I do think that he could get unlocked some more in the red zone. Obviously, you saw that spectacular highlight catch from him. So I think I don't think he's capped, because he can do a lot after the catch from the slot as well. And I think he is immediately the number 2 target behind Amari Cooper, as much as I still like Michael Gallup.
Okay, the Eagles traded Carson Wentz. Apparently, he tried to trade up to 3rd overall, but only if Zach Wilson is there. And for further condemnation against Justin Fields and Trey Lance, the Eagles traded back to 12 immediately once they couldn't get up to 3. And in the middle of this is poor Jalen Hurts. So, and say what you want about the 2022 quarterback class, they might have 3 first-round picks next year. So, Trav, what does this all mean for the Eagles' confidence level in Jalen Hurts? What is your confidence level as the resident Eagles fan? And Jalen Hurts
Yeah.
is not a sleeper
No,
in
true
fantasy.
that. True that. The guy's like a 7th-round pick.
Mhm.
So as far first, I want to address the moving up to 3. I wouldn't be surprised if that source lived in Miami and it was first reported in San Francisco, because it seems like that was designed specifically to spark some trade interest for the Dolphins. And I think it did just that. So that's how I'm going to address that one, because I'm not so sure. But as far as Jalen Hurts, I think they have, as full confidence as you can have in a guy with 4 career starts. I think they're kind of tied to him already. The trade back and the trade of Carson Wentz already kind of cement that for me. My confidence is decent. I'm not super stoked on the passing weapons producing, but I think Jalen Hurts is going to be great for fantasy. And I think he doesn't make a ton of mistakes. So I'm going to cut it off there, Ty, and say that I'm pretty confident in Jalen Hurts.
Totally. And I just worry about the passing weapons for sure as well. And just to roll out, Trav, and I'll let you take it away. The Giants added Kenny Golladay, big move for them. Daniel Jones was quietly really good deep passing last season. Maybe he can take the step. Definitely comes down to Jason Garrett, the offensive line. The Washingtons, I think, won the offseason. When you add such a high level cornerback, like a shutdown corner, you add a quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then you bring on Curtis Samuel and some ancillary weapons. I think they really won the offseason and should easily win that division.
Yeah, perfectly put. So Ty, I just want to say thanks to anybody who tuned into this show. We did miss the NFC North, but we'll try and cover that. So make sure you follow our YouTube channel, the TNFF Network. Thanks to everybody at Fantasy Points for putting this stuff together. We couldn't be more thrilled about it. And Ben, you are the hardest working guy in fantasy football. I know you can hear me when I say this, so we appreciate everything. And yeah, just everybody follow the Fantasy Points Media Group, because there's going to be some incredible stuff in store. Check our podcast out at TNFF Pod and the brand at True North FFB. Until then, yeah, thanks guys. We're gonna keep rocking on the True North content and love what the people over at Fantasy Points are doing.
And everybody's going to love what Tyler's got coming up next at the Dynasty Happy Hours. Well.
Absolutely. Keep it here, because Tyler and the Dynasty Happy Hour crew is going to have Wes Huber from Fantasy Points themselves on the show to go through a rookie mock draft. So really, really good content for this time of the year. And I'm excited to hop on and watch it after we get off the air here.